Welcome to On-Demand Instructions video on Literature Standard Number 7. We will discuss analyzing the representation of a subject or key scene in two different artistic mediums. We will be covering the core standards in literature, analyze the representation of a subject or key scene in two different artistic mediums, including what is emphasized or absent in each treatment. This session's goals are to analyze the representation of a subject or key scene in two different artistic mediums. Let's start with what you already might know about this subject by answering these questions. How do you identify bias, faulty reasoning, and/or sound evidence? How can you analyze the representation of a subject or key scene? Bias in writing means that the author only selected or chose to emphasize those points that support his opinion. By ignoring all of the points of a topic, the issue can be clouded or slanted in one direction. It can be difficult to tell when an author is using bias in a subject unless you know more about the subject than the author. Faulty reasoning is when an author uses unrelated or unconnected details as support. As an example, more people have cats than dogs, so cats must be easier to care for. The fact that more people own cats than dogs does not necessarily mean that cats are easier to take care of. There are many sources of evidence, but one must be alert when searching the evidence for untruths and bias. Research articles are good sources of sound evidence. Commentaries and opinion pieces can include interpretations and are an inroad for bias and faulty reasoning. Look for sound evidence in publications that have passed through peer critiquing before being accepted for publication. That way, you can make sure the publication has some quality control. The Internet is a great source of evidence. A lot of research is published on the Internet, but beware of the information you get. Look for sites published by the government, academic, and not-for-profit agencies. Evaluating other people's writing will help you to improve your own arguments and subject matter in writing, strengthening your skills as a writer and as a reader. Knowing how to find bias will help you make a correct analysis of the piece you are reading. Read the following poem. Use what you learned in this lesson to analyze the subject matter. The basic meaning of the poem is response to tragedy. Life goes on. The subject matter of the poem is the Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels. Auden compares ordinary events to extraordinary ones in this poem, but with this style of writing, he makes the extraordinary events seem more ordinary. Life goes on while a miraculous birth occurs, but also while the disaster of the death of Icarus happens. While the subject matter in Auden's poem is taken very seriously and his views are expressed, it's fair to say that Bruegel's painting takes the subject matter a little more lightly. On the bottom right of the painting, next to the ship, there are legs sticking out of the ocean, indicating that the fall of Icarus was not taken very seriously by Bruegel. Perhaps he meant to portray the death of Icarus as not being significant to make a point of the apathy of human suffering. Let's do an activity to further enhance your skills. Read this short story and identify the representation of a subject. What is the main idea the author is talking about? Does the author cloud the real issue with other information? Why should I read carefully when looking for evidence? A lot of false evidence exists. With the advent of the Internet, unqualified people can publish information online. You need to be a shrewd reader to make sure the information you're getting is unbiased and accurate. Why is it important to identify the representation of a subject when reading? Knowing what the story is about will help in being able to analyze it and get the true meaning of the story. How can I use the information I learned here? Use this data to become a wise reader, able to compare and contrast and read between the lines. As a student, you're expected to analyze the representation of a subject or key scene by recognizing bias, faulty reasoning, and sound evidence. We've come to the end of our session. We have discussed bias, faulty reasoning, sound evidence, using these to evaluate writing. To learn more, go to these websites for additional information. Return to www.ondemandinstruction.com for more instructional videos, podcasts, and materials. We update the site weekly.